Hi, everybody, and welcome to part 7 of our Tools to Engage webinar series. Today's discussion will be focusing on the 2020 census and how nonprofits in the Asian American and Pacific Island communities are advocating for resources and mobilizing community members, as well as how they've responded to the efforts to insert a citizenship question into the census. As I noted in the chat, the attendees are in listen-only mode, so we can't see or hear you, but again, feel free to use the chat to submit any questions or comments, and we will definitely sort of note them. The panelists may refer to them during their presentation, so we've all got that chat window open. So let's get started. The agenda that we've got is we're going to do a little bit of an introduction. We're going to talk about what the Tools to Engage webinar series is, and then really get into the meat of the presentation, which is hearing from our presenters about understanding the community efforts to mobilize responses for the census and the impact of the citizenship question. Each of those presentations will be about 10 minutes, so we'll have a good solid 20 minutes for questions and answers, and we'll also highlight some additional resources within the Tools to Engage body of work. So that is what our agenda is, and we will definitely want everybody to be active as participants in terms of sharing your insights during the meeting via chat. So today's presenters, and we're very excited, it's great to have a wide variety of both geographic, representation within sort of groups working in the AAPI community and sort of from different organizations. So I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves. Let's start with Raima with Asian Americans Advancing Justice. She's with us on the phone.
Thanks, TC. Hi, everyone. My name is Raima Roy. I am the Program Associate for Census and Civic Engagement at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. We are a national civil rights and advocacy organization that focuses primarily on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community. We work on a variety of issues, including census, voting rights, immigration, media diversity, and more. I specifically work on our census campaign, where I work on congressional advocacy, materials development, and our messaging research.
Great. And next we have Joseph Lachman with the Asian Counseling and Referring Service in Washington State. Joseph, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, again, my name is Joseph Shoji Lachman. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the Civic Engagement Program Manager at Asian Counseling and Referral Service. We were established 46 years ago in 1973 as a primarily social service organization for Asian American Pacific Islander communities, serve all immigrant refugee communities with a variety of culturally competent in-language social services in over 40 different Asian American, so Asian and Pacific Islander languages and dialects. I run the Civic Engagement Program, where we coordinate a variety of opportunities for voter engagement as well as non-voter engagement, and also help advocate on a variety of issues, including climate justice, voting rights, immigrant rights, as well as the 2020 census, which is an area that the Civic Engagement team at ACRS is very focused on right now.
Great. And lastly, we have XP Lee, who is from my hometown, Minneapolis, and he is with the Minnesota Council on Foundations.
Hello, everybody. This is XP Lee here. I am a program manager for policy and special projects, which means census, with the Minnesota Council on Foundations. And we are part of the lead organization for the Minnesota Census Mobilization Partnership. We're working with our Minnesota State Demographer's Office and other public entities like the states and the Census Bureau and other community-based organizations as well, and foundations to lead this work. So yeah, really looking forward to talking to everybody. And if you guys are familiar with Bob Tracy, who was the director of policy in CF, he'll be retiring soon. And so I am taking over this work from Bob.
Great, thanks a lot, XP. And I'm TC Doom, the Network and Learning Manager with the Building Movement Project. We're your hosts today and part of the Whole Tools to Engage webinar series. And we're pleased to have our presenters and all of you who are joining us on the phone. For those who just joined us, I want to repeat that the attendees are automatically placed in listen-only mode. So we can't see or hear you, but I definitely encourage you to use the chat function to submit the questions at any time during the presentations. Myself and Noel Uman will be monitoring the discussion on chat to make sure that we can lift up some of the comments and reflections and questions that come up. You may also use put your video in speaker only mode so you can see sort of like the face of the speaker during each section, and it'll save some space on your screen to view the slide deck that we prepared for you. And again, the slides and the recording of the webinar will be made available after, so don't worry if you don't catch every word. So first, I wanted to get a sense of who is in the room in terms of the participants. So we have a little poll, and that is what type of organization do you work for? I'm always really excited. This is new technology for me, and my heart is skipping a beat right now to see people responding. I always wonder, is it going to happen? Is it going to work? So thanks a lot, everybody, for already participating. Okay, great. It looks like I will share the results. I just shared the results, so you should be able to see it, but it looks like, you know, we have an actual pretty good mix of people working in nonprofit service organizations, intermediaries, other types of nonprofits, and people who are independent and not affiliated. So it looks like we've got a really good mix of people. The other thing we wanted to do to get a sense of who's in the room is to ask, what is your current role within your organization? Oops. Sorry, this was the technology piece that I was so scared of. Okay, what is your current role within your organization? And it looks like we've got a pretty good mix as well. Glad that we have one capacity builder, but we've got strong representation from organizational staff, organizational leadership, and a couple independent consultants. So great, good to know who's in the room. So just a little bit about the Building Movement Project before our panelists dive in and get into the good stuff. We're a national organization that does research to support, challenge, and push nonprofit organizations to be more focused on social change. We do this by focusing on 3 areas. The first is leadership, where we look at how leaders structure their organizations and who those leaders are. Over the last 2 years, we've been focusing on our Race to Lead research. We're actually closing out the 2019 survey tomorrow. So if you haven't heard of it, sort of go into racetolead.org. You can take the survey. We're trying to build a great body of data. The previous set of data, was really able to sort of provide a lot of strong insights on leadership within the nonprofit sector, and especially as applies to issues of race. The second area is service and social change, which focuses on how organizations, especially service organizations, support the voice and power of the people they serve. And I'm especially happy to have Joseph on the call because I think they're kind of the poster child for that body of work, if you don't mind me giving you some props there. And then the third focus is on movement building, looking to how organizations collaborate and work together to have more impacts than they could have on their own. This Tools to Engage in webinar series is an interactive multi-level, the Tools to Engage webinar series and the Tools to Engage is actually a portal that is a multi-level search portal that connects users to the best tools, research, and resources from across the social sector about how organizations can better align their principles with their practices. Of course, today's tools and today's webinar is going to be included among the 100+ resources available for free on the site. This webinar series is a way to lift up sort of what's happening in the field and particularly, to sort of like identify what's helpful and highlight the incredible work that organizations are doing across the country. So with that, I wanted to start with Raima to really give an overview and a grounding in the issue of the Census 2020, and particularly sort of the impact of the Citizenship Question. Really asking Raima to lay out, like, why should nonprofits and people in service organizations care about the 2020 census? Raima?
Thanks, Cindy. Thank you. So let's dive in. Could I get the next slide, please? Awesome, thank you. So this past year, we've been hearing a lot about the 2020 census, but what exactly is a census and why does it matter? Well, a census is a constitutionally mandated survey that takes place every 10 years and is meant to count every living person in the United States, regardless of immigration status. Being counted in the census is crucial for your family and your community, as data from the census is used to divide over $800 billion in funding annually for things like schools, hospitals, roads, libraries, community centers, and more. Some of the largest federal programs can be seen in this graphic, although they're not all here, such as SNAP and Medicaid. Next slide, please. So the census is also a crucial part of our democratic system. Data from the census is used to allocate members of the House of Representatives, the states, which translates to political power for your community. It is also used to redraw political district maps at all levels of government. Last but not the least, census data helps protect people from voting discrimination and make sure that jurisdictions provide language assistance to voters. So when communities aren't fully counted, they can lose out on a lot. Communities that particularly respond less to the census are known as hard to count. This means people fail to fill out the census, and this could be due to a variety of reasons, such as lack of awareness about the census or language access. This can lead to an undercount of a population, meaning the number of people in the census, the census records is less than the actual number of people living in a community. Communities that are historically hard to count include racial and ethnic minorities, renters, people with limited English proficiency, immigrants, and small children, or young children rather. As you can see in this graphic, 1/5 of Asian Americans live in hard to count areas, and 1/3 of NHPIs live in hard to count areas, meaning that we really have our work cut out for us and really need to focus on making sure that our communities are accurately counted. Next slide. And now, because of the current political environment, many people are worried about whether their census responses will be safe. Your responses are completely confidential, and the strongest laws in the land protect the confidentiality of your census responses through Title 13. Census Bureau is not allowed to share your personal information with anyone or any government services, including ICE or the police. The Census Bureau can only use your response to create general information about a population, like how many people live in your city, or statistics about age, gender, and race. The Census Bureau cannot share information about you as an individual. All Census Bureau employees have to adhere to this and are bound by law in keeping your information confidential. If they violate this and share your information, they could be given 5 years in prison and or a fine of $250,000. So how will the census be different from the previous census in 2010? There are actually several ways, in fact. So the 2020 census will be the first fully online census, and also the first census with a telephonic option for responding as well. So most people will be encouraged to fill out the form online, although everyone will eventually have the opportunity to fill out the paper form. There will also be 12 non-English language options for the online and telephone questionnaire, and 59 non-English assistant materials, such as language ID cards, guides, and glossaries. Unfortunately, the paper form will only be available in English and Spanish. And for the form itself, there's no Native American or NHPI language options. But on a positive note, person one on the form will have to answer how other people in the household are related to them. And for the first time, there will be a same-sex relationship option on the form. And then some other changes are that the recruitment for the census will also be entirely online. So if you want to become a census enumerator, you will have to navigate the application online. And then lastly, the Census Bureau, formally, in the previous census, they funded something called questionnaire assistance centers, which are locations such as local libraries or churches, where trained Census Bureau employees would be there to help answer questions or help people answer the form or train other people in the community to do so. But they will not be funding this program this year. So it will really fall on community organizations to do this work and set up QACs themselves. The alternative that the Census Bureau is currently saying that suggesting is that they're going to have this program called a mobile response initiatives, where Census Bureau employees will be kind of going around the country and traveling around the country to different events, such as, state fairs or community locations temporarily to help people with the census, but there won't be permanent QACs like there were before, which is definitely something we're pushing for. Next slide, please. All right, thank you. So something I want to make really clear is that the citizenship question will not be on the 2020 census form. So a little background on this for some people that might not have total awareness on this. In 2017, the DOJ requested the Census Bureau to add a new untested and unnecessary citizenship question on the 2020 census. And several civil rights organizations, including Advancing Justice AJC, filed lawsuits opposing the question. So in June 2019, the Supreme Court struck down the citizenship question, ruling that the Trump administration's reason for adding the question violated the law. And the court gave the administration a chance to do a do-over, but shortly after, the administration just announced that they would be giving up the fight and not be including the question on the form. So I want to repeat this again. The citizenship question will not be on the 2020 census.
And I just wanted to give the props to all of the advocates and especially the folks at AAJC who really led this fight to make sure that this question, which really has a chilling effect on immigrants, was not allowed to be on the census. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to wrap things up, AAJC is kind of serving as a national resource hub for Asian Americans and other communities. So we have our website that we launched in April 1st. It's called countusin2020.org, so feel free to check it out. We have a lot of resources up there, including our community engagement and communications toolkit, several fact sheets on different topics on the census, such as confidentiality or how to fill out the form, state and national fact sheets. So suppose you live in Minnesota and you want to go to your state legislature and you want to leave, leave behind, we have census fact sheets for each and every state. We actually have our own webinar series as well on the census that we've been doing for almost over a year now. So anyone wants to tune into those, we have those on there as well. And as well as partner resources from other organizations that we work with, such as NALEO and the Leadership Conference, and more. And later on in this year, we'll be releasing a lot of our fact sheets in 15 different Asian languages and a couple of NHPI languages as well. So yeah, feel free to check out Countusin 2020 for these different resources.
Great. Thanks for giving such a great overview, Raima. So just so we can continue to get a sense of who is in the room, we thought we'd do another poll directly related to the census work, which is basically, does your organization have paid staff who work on the census? And we have a really good mix of people. So like close to half and half, 57, 43, 57, 13 of you said that you don't have staff and 10 of you said that you do. So this is a really good mix. That's great. You know, and so, you know, when we brought up like, what's different about Census 2020? One of the things I've, you know, noticed and was highlighted to me, you know, with our presenters was the other thing that's different about Census 2020 is that the community has mobilized and organized much earlier and much faster. And so I wanted to sort of hand it over to Joseph to really talk about what's happening in Washington State.
Hey, thank you, TC, for that introduction. And again, my name is Joseph Shoji Lachman. I'm the Civic Engagement Program Manager at Asian Counseling and Referral Service in Seattle, Washington. And I'm really excited to be talking a bit about so some of the efforts of ACRS as well as the Washington Census Alliance around 2020 census in our state. Next slide. So just some quick background about Asian Counseling and Referral Service. So we were established in 1973 in response to the lack of culturally competent and in-language services for Asian American Pacific Islander communities in the greater Seattle and King County area. And over the last 46 years, we developed a variety of programs, behavioral health, human services. We have a food bank, youth development, aging and adult services for the elderly, including nutrition and exercise programs. And starting in 2015, we began developing a formal civic engagement program as well as policy advocacy, both for voters and non-voters as well, acknowledging the many folks in our communities who haven't been able to get their citizenship yet, and making sure that all of our folks can be engaged in a variety of ways. Next slide. So I'd like to talk a bit about so two aspects essentially of how ACRS is involved in the census, and it's looking at how we're involved in organizing internally within our organization, as well as externally with our broader statewide coalition. So starting with some of the internal census organizing that's going on at our agency, we've recognized that ACRS is seen as a trusted organization and messengering community, which is why we're working to coordinate our organization's leadership and all of our staff internally to make sure that they can mobilize for a 2020 census, inform other staff all the way down through the organization, as well as the clients and the broader community that we serve. And that means that we're creating an internal field plan to integrate census mobilization efforts into our direct services. We've been inviting the Census Bureau staff themselves to attend some meetings such as our all-staff meetings or team meetings. They can provide information and training. And then designing just a variety of opportunities for our staff to engage with the census at different levels. Part of that is allowing staff to participate at a level that fits their capacity. Part of this is helping to figure out how clients are feeling, responding to things like the Citizenship Question, because we've seen a lot of fear from some of our clients when we talk to them about census. And that's one of the things that ACRS can do, though, is we have case managers and other staff who have these very trusted relationships with clients. So for staff, there are a lot of different opportunities for them to engage, and that means just attending an info session, sharing information just with their network, doing a train-the-trainer session, doing presentations to clients, a lot of times in collaboration with the civic engagement team staff, helping with translation. So there's some languages that we serve. We serve close to 40 different Asian American Pacific Islander languages and dialects. And so sometimes our staff help cover when their materials are not available in, let's say, Mien, for example, or Khmu, or languages that aren't as widely served. We have staff helping to set up census clinics. We're doing an ACRS census kickoff early next year prior to Census Day. Setting up a training, so having staff setting up trainings either with the Census Bureau or with other partners. We'll be doing, GOTC, Get Out the Count phone banking and other kind of GOTC activities, as well as sharing information about census jobs, as we do have an employment program at our agency. But it really comes down to making sure that, as an organization, that internally that we're doing everything we can to gather input from the community, from all of our community members who come for other services, and making sure that we're doing what we can with these kind of trusted relationship we have to help clients feel safe being part of the enumeration. So that's kind of our internal organizing, and that brings us to the external census organizing that we're involved with. ACRS serves as a hub for the Asian Pacific Islander Coalition of Washington, and we're present in 6 counties across Washington State, and that, for folks who maybe are familiar with some of Washington's geography, that includes some of the highest API populations, such as King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties, but also some smaller areas, including around the state capital in Olympia, as well as so going over the mountains to Yakima and all the way over to Spokane in eastern Washington. So we help distribute census updates and resources to our coalition partners from across Washington State. Obviously very grateful to folks at Advancing Justice and API Health Forum and others that help provide some of the national updates. So helping to coordinate response to potential citizenship questions. And then we're able to also take the input that comes from the clients that we work with, the folks who come to services at ACRS, and pass a lot of their concerns on to the national partners to incorporate into the materials that they're putting out. And we also help coordinate Census Bureau staff engagement with a lot of our coalition partners and set up training opportunities. We were incredibly grateful also to API Vote, so in June coming out to work with us on doing an all-day census training at our building. We also help coordinate census grants and funding opportunities, and work on, offering opportunities for joint proposals for folks who maybe, if their organizations don't have necessarily the bandwidth to apply for some of the larger grants. So we're actually helping to coordinate outreach efforts among around 25 different AAPI immigrant refugee organizations across Washington state, applying for funding from the Office of Financial Management at the state level, since we all jointly work together to fight for increased funding from the state for 2020 census outreach efforts. ACRS also serves on our City of Seattle, King County, and Washington State Complete Count committees. So to help with providing some input to local government as well as state government on the needs for API communities in solidarity with other communities of color. And we're also a part of the Washington Census Alliance, which brings us actually to the next slide. So this is our Washington Census Alliance logo, and it's actually a statewide coalition that's come together recently. Also, a couple of shout outs. We have a few folks actually on the webinar, I think right now, part of our Washington Census Alliance. So hi, Ophelia, a few others. The next slide. So the Washington Census Alliance, it's really, compared to 2010 and before, it's an unprecedented collaboration that's going on in Washington state right now. The mission of the Washington Census Alliance is to coordinate and ensure the safe and fully informed participation of our historically undercounted communities in the 2020 census. So what we really want to see is safe, fair, and complete count to ensure funding and representation for everyone. And some of the key points about the Washington Census Alliance, it's over 70 different organizations across Washington state, led by and serving communities of color, including APIs, Latinx, Black, African American, Native, Indigenous, and others. We have organizations that are specifically, for example, led by queer Pacific Islanders, led by Southeast Asian folks. So it's a variety of organizations that all came together during our legislative session early in the year of Washington state, and actually successfully pushed to convince the legislature and the governor to approve $15 million in funding for census outreach efforts for historically undercounted communities. And originally our state government had only planned to put in maybe $3 to $5 million, and we pushed very hard throughout the entire legislative session on the governor's office and both the House of Representatives and the Senate and our state legislature, and got them to increase that amount multiple times until it reached that $15 million amount that we've been asking for all along. So we're helping to align census funding, advocacy, and outreach strategies for communities and organizations across the state, and ensuring that under-resourced communities have equitable access to resources. And that really is talking about the communities that otherwise may not have had the bandwidth to even apply for census outreach funding, or what we call historically undercounted. And the reason we say that is a lot of times they're referred to as hard to count, but we do think of that as coming from a framework that views our communities as hard to count because maybe they don't understand, the strategies that we use to engage with our communities that maybe aren't as, that sometimes the mainstream approach doesn't work as well for. But we really want to make sure that there's infrastructure in place in our state for everyone to be so fully informed and to feel safe being a part of the enumeration. So the main takeaways that we wanted to, I think, emphasize is that organizations like ACRS, service providers, advocacy organizations throughout Washington have been mobilizing in response to the Citizenship Question, the general threat of the undercount, because for each person in Washington state who isn't counted, we lose potentially about $23,000. So per person per year, over the decade. And there's just the general anti-immigrant political environment that we're dealing with, and a lot of our clients, a lot of the folks we work with who are getting services from us, we see that that concern from them, And we're able to help figure out what their concerns are, amplify those voices with the Census Bureau as well as national partners and our state governments, and really making sure that we're serving as both, as an organization that's both a service provider but also a social justice advocate. So we really think of it as social service plus social justice, and that's really key to the mission of Asian Counseling and Referral Service. So I think that mostly wraps up what I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to, I guess in the next slide, just offer some my contact information again with ACRS. So it's just my first name, last initial at acrs.org. And then for the Washington Census Alliance, there's contact information. And please, if you just type in Washington Census Alliance on Facebook, our social media will come up there as well. You can see a lot of updates so organizational updates from our Census Alliance. And again, thank you so much. I'm also happy to type that information into the chat for folks. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. So our last speaker is XP Lee with the Minnesota Council on Foundations, and really talking about from sort of that partnership level, what's happening in Minnesota. XP?
Right. So very similar to the Washington Census Alliance, the Minnesota Census Mobilization Partnership is our statewide partnership. So we've got our public sector partners, the Census Bureau and the states, and then we've also got our community-based organizations. And something that I just wanted to clarify is MCF, the Minnesota Council on Foundations, is a nonprofit. But we are what's called a PSO, a philanthropy serving organization. So we have over 150 different foundations that are our membership that we serve. Anywhere from small family foundations, other private foundations, community-based foundations, corporate foundations, and all the way up to our larger foundations like the Minneapolis Foundation and St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation. So early in 2015. It was really through the leadership of MCF and our state demographer that really started the ball rolling in terms of getting this partnership together to the point, to where we're at right now. And you can go next slide. Actually, you can forward a little bit, TC. Let's go a couple more slides. I'll come back to these projects. Go one more. All right. Oh, go back to the diagram. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So the most important thing that I wanted to highlight is that our partnership was established. We did a lot of work of securing funds. We're at a total of about 4.2 million from the state so far, 1.6 in this last funding cycle. And last year, our biggest accomplishment was being able to pull some of our community-based organizations in partnership, with a grassroots solution with our contracted facilitator to be able to create a Census 2020 communication and mobilization plan. And this is a strategic approach that came out of our Census co-creation table, which has about 13 organizations that represents historically undercounted communities from all across the state. So this is really the crux of our engagement strategy moving forward, because now we're starting to hit the implementation phase. And you can find that at mcf.org/census. So that's our website. And again, I'm not sure if I have it, if it's not on the slide, I can definitely share it in the chat box as well. But that's a great accomplishment. And because we knew that from the beginning, especially for some of our historically undercounted communities, the Census Bureau and information from the federal level was not going to be able to reach our populations, because the unique thing about Minnesota is that a majority of our communities of color are communities that are immigrants and refugees. For example, the Asian population here in Minnesota is mostly Hmong, and Hmong language and outreach is integrated into anything that's coming out of the federal bureau. So, TC, can you go to the next slide?
Mhm.
So these are the themes that came out of our work, and it's not listed here, but towards the bottom, what begins to be drawn is that the overarching theme is that the communities here in Minnesota that are undercounted, they want to feel empowered. They want to feel that this is that the 2020 census is their tool, their opportunity to be counted, to be visible in the data and in all these decisions that will be made based on the data. So that's what's driving our strategic engagement and our relational organizing that's happening. And if you go to our website and you download the communications plan, you'll be able to read deeper into these 11 themes that came out of that. Next slide. So this is really where I wanted to get to. We've got the three components, the Census Bureau, the federal component and what they're doing to the left there, and then Minnesota State Demographer and other state partners, the governor's office, have been supportive and what they're doing there. But right in the middle, the Minnesota Census and Civic Partnership, which is where we're all coming together, has really been focused in three different areas: advocacy, special projects, and organizing and mobilizing. And you can see that the communications plan fell under special projects. We're also working on trying to get some legal support and legal response structures put together in partnership with our AG's office. Now, similar to what NALEO has going currently. So we're still, that's the works. And then organizing and mobilizing, what we've done really is created 5 different hubs. So our census co-creation table that helped to create the communications plan is now one of our implementation hubs, and they have reach into various, hard to count communities across the state. I'm sorry, undercounted communities. And then apart from that, we have our Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, who's going to have some money to be able to support our nonprofit hubs, nonprofit organizations in Minnesota. And so that's the hub where most of our nonprofits is going to engage for funding and support. And then we have our Tribal and Native Communications Hub. And then that is in partnership with our Minnesota Native Government Center. And we have a coordinator that's going to be helping with that hub. And then we have a Greater Minnesota and Rural Minnesota Communities Hub. That's being led by one of our rural Minnesota foundations called Landed Foundation. And we're also providing them with a coordinator as well. And then the fifth one is a complete count committee. That one's being led by the state, and they're also working in partnership with Minneapolis Foundation to be able to provide various grants at various phases heading into 2020 to help complete count committees that have been established through our Chicago office all across the state, to provide them with some monies to help them engage with their local.
And XP, all of these groups are coming together. You guys are convening all of these groups then?
Yes. So
great.
We had quarterly partnership meetings where the different partners come and give updates, and we talk about how we've been getting ready. But starting in November, we're going to transition to monthly. We're going to add to the meetings monthly hub working meetings. And then outside of that, we have a coordination team meeting of some of the main coordinators to be able to plan for both the hub working meetings as well as the quarterly partnership meetings. So the partnership meetings we have, again, like probably over 100 or so organizations represented from across the state. And then the monthly hub meetings that are going to be started are going to be just focused on coordinating the work within the hubs, as well as other allies and partnerships that are connected directly to the hubs. So that's what we're going to be starting in the next month or so. And then, next slide. These are just a brief list of our partnership, like main partnership partners, as well as the public sector offices that we work with. And then at the bottom are our co-creation table. And so we're working in terms of Asian American focused organizations with Asian American Organizing Project, CAPI USA, and Hmong American Census Network. And their focus cuts into youth, elders, and definitely the immigrant and refugee populations. And so wraparounding them, right now we've been able to get involved our Minnesota Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, CAPM is the acronym. So they're looking into creating their own CCC at this point. That will be an awesome addition to the partnership, because the council at the state level has the connections to all of the various communities across the state. And so if we can bring them into the partnership to help with the work, then that covers most of the gaps. I would probably say like 90% of the gaps in the Asian American community in Minnesota. So we'll continue to work to continue to push towards a complete count. But yeah, in terms of nonprofits, we've got different access points. Again, the nonprofit hub that's being led by our Minnesota Council on Nonprofits. But outside of the partnership, there are also government funds and other foundations funding work that's outside of the partnership. So there's so we're trying to just make sure that everybody is aware of everything that's going on, so that way organizations can plug into the partnership, but also local government, coordinating efforts and outreach and other efforts if they're trying to reach outside of the Twin Cities metro area as well. So we have connections there as well. So yeah, if you go one more slide, you'll see my contact info. And then again, if you go to mcf.org/census, you'll find some more information on our partnership.
Thanks, XP, for highlighting the broad partnerships that you've been putting together and who've been coming together around the census work. So we do have a little bit of time. I appreciate everybody hanging in there, and also the panelists for sharing some great information. So wanted to open up to some questions, but as people are typing in their questions in the chat, I had a few questions myself, which is for all of the presenters, where are the resources coming to do this work, particularly the funding? I mean, I think all of you are mobilizing, organizing, and sort of how is that work being supported?
Should I go?
Sure.
All right. Again, this is Joseph with the Asian Counseling Referral Service in Seattle, Washington. So the funding that we're able to access is coming from a variety of sources, but really it's been a community push to make those resources available in the first place. Like, we've had to push on foundations, push on local and state government for funding. So there's some coming from the Seattle Foundation, for example. There's some coming from City of Seattle, King County, Washington State government, and then there's Philanthropy Northwest, which is helping to coordinate some of that funding, but also helping to work with private philanthropy sources as well. And then we do have some national partners that are providing some resources, some funding as well. And so it really is it's a variety of some of the public dollars that are coming through government, some of the private foundations, public foundations. So it's definitely cobbling together as much as you can from as many sources as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same with the Minnesota Census Mobilization Partnership. We had a bill that gave us 1.6 million Again, in that last cycle, we've been able to use most of that. Well, a little over half went to the demographer's office for their outreach efforts. A little less than half the partnership. And so those state funds, coupled with private foundation money that we've been able to put together, uh, is what's being, into the hubs work to get the work done. And then outside of that, other local governments and foundations have also been, supplementing their own work as well outside of the partnership. So yeah, just a combination of dollars.
Great.
Yeah, and for AJC, our census program is something we've been a long-standing program that we've had for several years, but it's also just been, just like everyone else, been funded from a variety of different sources, such as foundations and private organizations. One of our main funders is the Culture Foundation, so they've been funding a lot of our census work, so we've been able to, use their budget to kind of really develop all the different census materials at a national level, so people, so our community partners around the country can use them at a local level. So it's been a really great partnership with them.
Great. The other question I had was sort of like, what do you see, especially in the wake of the citizenship question, are the biggest barriers that the AAPI community is going to face in getting out the census? Raina, can we start with you since you have the eagle-eyed view?
Sure. Yeah. I feel like a question that I've gotten a lot at different events that I've been to is just on confidentiality and whether the census form is safe to fill out. And it's a really hard question to answer because there is no right answer for it, really. Like, in the end of the day, people, regardless of whether the question is on the form or not, the damage has kind of been done and really tainted what the form is, because it's just really meant to be a data collecting method, and it's just really been politicized in this past year. So, so really the message that we really just been kind of harping on is that the form is meant to help you, it's not meant to harm you. And that in the end of the day, it is your choice. We can't force people to fill it out. It is mandated by law, but, and everyone's fears are totally, completely valid. But in the end of the day, the form is meant to help you, and it's meant to really help your community and your families. And it really impacts every factor of your life, and when you don't even think about it, the roads that you use, schools, hospitals, just everything in your daily life. Census really impacts it. So when you don't fill it out, your community is kind of left out because it's just really a large fabric of our democracy and the way that that we're funded, that we're funded for so many different kind of for social programs. So just trying to get that message to really resonate with people and to ensure that the census is safe for people to fill out.
Great. And then we have a question in the chat, which is, do you work with other communities of color in coalition? I know XP had responded that the MCMP works with everybody, but can you all highlight some examples of sort of partnerships with other communities of color?
Did you want me to do that? Kind of go into
sure.
a little bit more? Sure. So, I mean, going back to the list from the slideshow, working with Asian American organizations, we're working with Black and African immigrant organizations, we're working with Islamic organizations, we're working with Native and tribal, where we got partnerships and allies with disabled organizations. We're starting partnerships with an elder and senior focused organization, and also the Leadership Council on Aging, and their focus is to engage all elders from all various communities. Let's see, we're working with a lot of organizations that are focused in Hispanic and Latin, X community. Yeah, so I feel like that has really a reach.
In the last minute, I wanted to ask, actually, Joseph, like on that similar question, has sort of the, with your partners in multiple different communities of color, has the citizenship question sort of adjusted your approach, especially in the partnership work?
Definitely. The citizenship question, I think that reverberated across all the partners and all the communities involved in the Washington Census Alliance. And we had to have some deep conversations about, making folks feel like they could be a part of this. I'm coming at this from a perspective of being a Japanese American whose family was rounded up during World War II, and Japanese American community, was one of the very few communities in history that has been a very clear victim of a breach of the confidentiality that led to the stronger protections that we have now. And that's, I think, for me personally, that's helped influence my perspective, but also we have a lot of folks throughout the coalition, in the Latinx community, other communities that, as well as some folks in the Muslim community who have all have strong concerns about, in particular, government surveillance of their communities that's burdensome and unfair and unconstitutional a lot of times. And we've had to really think carefully about, if we're going to be using our trusted names as messengers on the census, we want to make sure that every person who participates, and that we're reaching out to about participating in the census, really feels like what they're doing is safe and in the best interest of their community, and never feel like we're ever kind of abusing that trust with them, because that's the most important thing that we've built up over, these last several decades with different communities. And we've really seen some strong responses from folks about, just concerns over privacy in API communities and other communities as well. It's really been a matter of centering the most affected communities, listening to what their concerns are, and making sure that there are multiple kinds of resources and opportunities for them to learn about the confidentiality, the importance of the census, and also just the the resources that will be available for them to help make sure that they feel fully informed about how they're participating. And that's been, I think, the major way that we've tried to overcome a lot of the fear that's been propagated.
Great, thank you. And thanks everybody for going a little bit over time. I appreciate everybody hanging in there. So I just wanted to say that there are additional resources on the Service and Social Change body of work in our Tools to Engage website. So I highly recommend people going. As you can see on the slide, it's tools2engage.org, and feel free to go there, look at the resources. This webinar will be on there, as well as the slide deck. And I wanted to thank all of our presenters and all of you on the phone and who are participating for being part of this. And thank you so much. Thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.